So the need for risk scorecarding really has to do with a gap that currently exists in how risk is dealt with in organizations. Typically, risk is charted on a heat diagram like this, where on the left axis we're going to look at the likelihood that something's going to happen from low to high, and across the bottom the impact of that risk occurring, again from low to high. Again, something that has a low impact and low likelihood would fit into the low risk category, and we gravitate to the top right corner where something that has a high impact and high likelihood becomes a critical issue for leadership. Now, this is an effective way to categorize your risks, but there's a couple of shortcomings that we need to address as CMAs. Thing one is we know that the average leadership team is not necessarily aligned around the strategic objectives. Some executives will think one strategic objective is more important than another one. And in that world, when you come to evaluate the impact of a risk against this bottom criteria, every leader is going to be taking a look at it in a different way. If I used a simple example, if you think of your kids, you might decide that a child at school, the impact of doing badly at math is more important, a higher risk, than the impact of doing poorly at, say, hockey. So you would deal with a low school mark differently than a low hockey mark. So the shift in strategic priority across the leadership team will affect your ability to correctly scale the impact of any possible risk. We need to fix that gap. Thing two, once you've identified that risk, it doesn't link back to any strategic objective. So my previous example with your children, you might think that school is more important than hockey. Well, that's implying a strategy that you hope your child would become a CMA, not a hockey player. But if it was the opposite, if your strategy was to help your child become a hockey player, then the risk of a poor hockey performance is a more significant risk. So we need the ability to not only identify the risk, but identify the root of that thinking. What are the related strategic objectives associated with that risk? Thing three is this quadrant model on the left doesn't allow you to relate that risk to the specific actions in the organization, the processes and projects that you and your employees work on day to day to achieve success. And if I identify a risk, but I don't know what processes impact that risk, it's hard to take action. Again, if we go back to the child example, a poor mark, you might take a look at processes like homework and study groups and even the friends that they hang out with. So we need to understand the processes so you can begin to work on remedies. 4, it's difficult to reassess those risks based on shifts in strategy. So as my strategy changes, let's say partway through the year you decide that in fact hockey is more important than school for whatever reason, you are going to reallocate your risks based on that new understanding. In a more realistic example, back to the organization, if you shift your strategy from trying to penetrate new markets to, say, getting share of wallet, your risks will change because things that were unimportant before, when you're looking for penetrating new markets, now manifest themselves when I'm looking for share of wallet. So we need the ability to dynamically adjust our risk register and our risk priorities based on shifts in strategy. And then finally, it's impossible to surface the natural team that you need to pull together with that matrix on the top left of this screen. We need the ability, again, to link it back to the process and projects, what people in your organization are accountable for, so we know the specific individuals we need to bring in to help grapple with those risks. So this is why building a risk scorecard becomes important, to enable you as a manager to take action on those risks. How does a risk scorecard help you do it? Well, as we discussed before, it becomes a single source of information that links your strategic objectives, your strategic priorities, the risk register, the key risk indicators, and your processes and projects into a single view of the organization. It also creates that top-down from strategy, management, to the employees, and bottom up from the employees to management to strategy, cross-check of strategy and its manifestation. It also allows us to provide consistent treatment for risks, no matter what region, brand, department, area of the organization it comes from. And finally, it allows us to communicate to all stakeholders where risk may be occurring based on the most recent performance information.